Do you actually have to be on cocaine to be on this podcast?
It's a great day to be a Wildcat!
Cocaine.
Durfing.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to yet another edition of Cocaine Willie, the official K-State representative on the College Huddle. I am your commissioner, Bob Trollsby, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, the good chef Andre Napier and Fireball Matt Marchesini. And for tonight, we are, at long last, previewing the 109th edition of Farmageddon, which will not be played in Ames, Iowa, or Manhattan, Kansas, but will be played in Dublin, Ireland, as we all know, in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. And for our third Iowa State game preview, he missed out on one over the last 4 years, but he has been here for every other one. We've got Jake Brend, a recurring guest, Chief Content Officer at Cyclone Fanatic, a content creator at Iowa Everywhere, and 2024 Iowa Sportscaster of the Year.
Thanks for having me. I
a lot of accolades.
I wish we were doing this over a couple pints in Dublin, but I'm going with my family, and I don't know the itinerary. I know we're going to the Guinness Factory Wednesday, and I know we're leaving Dublin Thursday, and that is all I know outside of showing up to the press box like 2 hours before the game. That is all I know so far about my trip to Dublin. But I'm glad to join you guys again, and I'm honored to be the recurring Iowa State guest for you guys over here.
Yeah,
on your program.
We've loved having you on, and you already answered my second question, which is what is on your itinerary for Dublin. It sounds like you don't know what that is, but maybe some pints with Fireball Matt and I will be in the cards at some point while we're over there. Before we dive into the preview episode, we do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Auntie May's Parlor, located at 616 North 12th Street in the heart of Aggieville. I love Auntie May's Parlor. If you're not going to be making it over to Dublin, you should be pre-gaming, post-gaming. Well, I guess you can't pre-game a 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock kick in Central Time Zone at Auntie May's, but perhaps post-gaming if things go our way. But yeah, visit auntiemays.com for a full list of their upcoming events. Looking at the week of the game on Thursday, August 21st, they've got Techno Night with DJ Ree. That's a no cover event. It's 21 only, so be mindful of that. We've got Pie and Cocktails. It's sold out again. People love to go to Pie and Cocktails over at Auntie May's Parlor. But as always, check them out at auntiemays.com. I will be sending out some koozies here this week as we're recording it. So hopefully they'll be there in time for the game in Dublin next week. But check out Auntie May's, and that's going to do it for our sponsorship there. But Jake, I wanted to ask you, because within K-State circles, this has been easily the most highly anticipated opening game of any season we've had, at least that I can remember. And it doesn't even seem really particularly close. There have been some non-conference matchups. There have been some that we've really been excited for in the past, like our game against Auburn in 2014, but that wasn't a season opener. In the Iowa State circles, is it as highly anticipated as it has been on the K-State side? Because I know this is a rivalry, but how highly anticipated has this been from the Iowa State perspective?
Easily the most anticipated season opener of my remembrance, I guess. 2002, Iowa State played Florida State at Arrowhead. This is easily the most. Since then, I wasn't old enough to remember that Florida State game, but that FSU game, as you guys know, when you're playing an out-of-conference opponent, especially in this era of college football, when it's just about getting to the playoff, winning your conference, there has never been a more important season opener for Iowa State, and I'm sure you guys would say the exact same thing about K-State, because I was playing with the M-Red standings generator, as everyone became friends with last year, to figure out the tiebreakers and stuff. That was just how I did my preseason poll. I went game by game, And I found out that pretty much no matter what, if both of these teams go 7-2, as I think for both of us, we'd probably consider that the floor of what you'd have to expect to get in. If both teams go 7-2, whoever wins this game is going to have a really hard time of missing out on the Big 12 championship. And on the flip side, I couldn't find a scenario where if I picked K-State and Iowa State went 7-2, I couldn't find a scenario where they got in with the tiebreaker. So this game is pretty much worth 2 points in the standings when you factor in tiebreakers, you factor in the momentum, the fact that you could be 1-0 in Big 12 play before even playing Iowa. Do you guys play Missouri this year? Is
No.
But either way, heading into the non-conference, you're already 1-0. The stakes have never been even close to this high.
Kind of want to talk a little bit about last year and what Coach Campbell has done for the program for y'all. So last year you eclipsed 10 wins, a huge monumental number of wins in the season for the program, first time in program history. Make it to the Big 12 championship game. Arizona State, kind of a juggernaut in that game.
Yeah.
Cam Scattaboo is a juggernaut. Coach Campbell has done incredible things for the program. I think all of us here and a lot of K-State fans who are not living under a rock would agree that he has really revitalized that program and made it very much a national program and huge for the Big 12. When you think of the historical nature of Iowa State and this football program, do you think Coach Campbell is the best head coach you've had in program history?
No question. He is so far and away the best in school history, not only from getting the program on the map and in making a Big 12 championship or two, but the fact that he's been able to go head-to-head with an Oklahoma or a Texas or a Kansas State, that's something that didn't really exist. Dan McCarney, Paul Rhodes, they would knock off the Nebraska every 5 or 10 years, maybe. Paul Rhodes beat Oklahoma State, but that win that, well, frankly, broke the BCS forever and changed college football, while it was an amazing win, it was still so fluky. What Matt Campbell's been able to do, beat Oklahoma a few times. He's turned Jack Trice Stadium into an actual place where it's a home field advantage. It's not just you're playing at home. Brock Purdy went 17-1 at Jack Trice Stadium against Big 12 opponents. That is something that if you would have told me in 2015 when Paul Rhodes got fired after the most inexplicable coaching job I've seen in my life down at Bill Snyder Family Stadium, I would have called you crazy. And the fact that Campbell has turned it into a year-in, year-out thing, there's been a couple bumps along the way, but he's been able to sustain success at a place that you guys know before Bill Snyder got to K-State. It's hard to win in the Midwest. It's hard to win when you're the second biggest school in a state. And granted, you guys own Kansas completely, but from a fan base perspective, and I think this pretty similar donor bases where it's a lot of farmers, you don't have a bunch of lawyers and doctors that are able to fund your program. Iowa State and K-State are in the similar boat, but when you bring a guy along like Bill Snyder or Matt Campbell and establish what they have, it makes it no doubt in my mind that Campbell's the best coach that has come through Ames.
And I would agree. Does the conference title piece, would that cement a legacy for him, or do you think for what he's done, for everything he's done so far, does a conference title matter in the grand scheme of his legacy?
I think his legacy is pretty cemented, but it could be even greater. Mm-hmm. Because if you want to give him the title of the greatest Iowa State football coach in history, he's got that. Is he the greatest coach in Iowa State athletics history? You could certainly make that argument. With a Big 12 championship, you could just make the argument at that point that he's maybe the best figure in Iowa State athletics history. And that's where I think his legacy can go further. And I never thought Iowa State could play for a Big 12 championship, at least in a round robin landscape like we used to see, or a top 2 teams. Granted, when it was the Big 12 North, essentially if Nebraska or K-State had a down year, then maybe you could see a world where Iowa State almost got in one year at, I think, 8-4 or 7-5. They almost got into the Big 12 championship to get eventually ass blasted by Texas. That'd be the only time ever I could see Iowa State in the Big 12 championship. But the fact that they've made it twice, I never expected that to be a possibility. And now the next step is to win it. And when they lost to Oklahoma in 2020, they beat OU in the regular season. Against Arizona State, they were favored. They lost both of those games, so it's not some hurdle that I think can't be cleared. It's just a matter of, can they actually do it, and can they step up to the occasion and play an A to an A- game in Dallas? And that we haven't seen that yet.
So what I hear you saying is Matt Campbell is a greater football coach than Pop Warner.
I'd love to see Pop Warner have to game plan for Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield. He'd collapse on the spot, I think.
Yeah. Heart attack central.
Yeah, he'd never have a chance. And Matt Campbell wouldn't have a chance either, because he's not doing it by himself. If he had to do all this by himself, he wouldn't stand a chance. But he's got coaches on that staff. Is it Mauser or is it Mauser?
Yeah, Mauser.
Taylor Mauser is your OC, and he came over last year, and he had this offense low-key kind of humming. I mean, y'all are 25th most efficient offense in the country. You guys threw the ball a lot. Rocco Beck was outstanding. He had some dynamic wide receivers to throw the ball to, but they're gone. So what are we expecting from this offense, really? And then what does Taylor Mauser's impact have to do with anything? Does he take a step as an OC in his second year?
Yes, I think Mauser, for better or worse, is the most aggressive play caller that I've seen at Iowa State. The reason, if you think back to 2021, when Iowa State came in, returned pretty much every single player from that Fiesta Bowl team, and had a disappointing year, I think a lot of that came back to too conservative of offensive play calling. It became too predictable for the other team, and that's where I think Mauser really excelled last year. Was he sometimes too aggressive? Maybe. Should he have run the ball a little bit more, tried to establish the run? Maybe. And I think as they head into year 3 of the offensive line coach, Ryan Clanton, I think the goal is that line takes another step up, because I still don't think it was good last year. I think it was serviceable at times and below average at other times, but it was an upgrade over his first year. So I think a lot of how Mauser dictates the offense comes down to how that offensive line develops. And of course it comes down to Rocco. The thing at Iowa State that they always say, it's players, formations, and then plays. And they want the ball in the hands of their best player. And Rocco Becht is their best player. Now who's on the other end it will be different, because Higgins and Knoll accounted for 65% of their yards, touchdowns, catches last season. So it'll most likely be the tight ends, I think, will be the top targets, but there's also a couple transfers coming in. Chase Sowell, Xavier Townsend, they kind of fit the mold and the build of Higgins and Knoll, but it's impossible to expect them to step into that type of production, especially early on.
Those are big shoes to fill, and Rocco obviously had weapons all 3 years that he's been throwing the ball. Obviously, knowing that the first year he wasn't the starter, but when you think about some of those Iowa State wide receivers that have been through the program with Xavier Hutchins, I think all of them are Houston Texans now too, which is kind of strange. But Rocco enters year 3 at Iowa State and has had some really incredible production in his 2 seasons as a starter, with 3,100 plus yards, both back-to-back seasons, 23 or more touchdowns in each of those seasons, only threw 9 interceptions last year, and had 8 touchdowns also on the ground last year with 388 yards rushing. So definitely added more of that second dimension to his game that we maybe hadn't seen in the year prior. But Do you feel like last year, because those are numbers that any K-State fan, if they saw that their quarterback had those kind of numbers, you would have thought, okay, that might be the ceiling for where we can go from here. But for a guy like Rocco, knowing that some of that talent has gone away, you're bringing in some pieces that maybe there are some question marks around. Do you think that last year was his ceiling? How much higher do you think he could exceed that? I guess I'm just curious how you think he can perform coming into 2025, knowing just how much he did last year with what he had around him.
I think if you look at it in total, I wouldn't call it a ceiling, but those numbers were pretty good. But from an efficiency standpoint, he can bring that efficiency up 6-7 points. I think he was at 58-59% last year. That number needs to be, and I think it will be, in that 65-66 range. He can also cut out the pick sixes. He threw 9 interceptions last year. 4 of them were housed. 4, like, that's unacceptable. Couple of them were drops off a receiver, but still, that comes down to the quarterback not putting the ball in those situations. So that's where I think he can be better. And it's weird because if you ask me to grade Rocco's season last year, it really ranges from a C+ to a B+, and it hinges on 4 plays or 4 game-winning drives. Of the 11 games Iowa State won last year, Rocco led 4 game-winning drives in the final 2 minutes of the game. He led a 5th, and then the defense gave up a touchdown against Texas Tech. So Rocco didn't – I thought he underachieved in my eyes, and he was underwhelming from minutes 1 through 58 for the majority of the season, but he made up for it by coming in the clutch not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times, and that earns him a lot of goodwill. But he said it himself. Mauser and Campbell have said it himself. Like, he's got to be more consistent in quarters 1 through 3 to maybe not put the offense in the position to need a miracle 2-minute drive 4 different times to go win games.
Let's talk a little bit about the running backs. Position group that historically is really, really good at Iowa State. Last season, no exception. Carson Hansen, leading rusher, almost 800 yards on the ground last year, 13 touchdowns on 151 carries. That's a pretty good number there. He was definitely a guy who your running backs don't necessarily catch a ton of passes outside. No. They are primarily there to run the football, grind yards against the defense. Abu Sama, K-State's nightmare a couple years ago, also had a pretty good season, almost 600 yards on the ground on 124 carries. Are we anticipating kind of the same dynamic duo working together this year? Any other names that you see popping up? Anything big in the run game that you think K-State fans need to be looking out for?
Yeah, I think it's more of the same. I think Hansen will take a bit of a jump. When you would have seen him last year, he was dinged up. He was really good up until the start of November and then got healthy before the bowl game and looked really good. But I've had a lot of my colleagues and counterparts call it 1A, 1B, and I kind of disagree. I think Hansen has cemented himself as the clear RB1. Sama really struggled at points last year with vision. I'm not going to be a dick. You guys have seen what he can do when he has space, and the problem is sometimes it's seeing the space and hitting the hole. And Hansen was far more consistent at if they needed 5 yards, he'd get 6. Whereas Sama is more well, if it's 1st and 10, might as well run inside zone and see if he can break loose a home run. And that's where I trust Hansen in a Farmageddon that typically is a 1-possession game, and it comes down to getting those big first downs. But I don't think the run game will be too much different than what we're used to in this game. If anything, the way it improves is if the offensive line not takes a big jump like I expect, but takes a marginal jump from last year like I expect it to.
Now, you said something interesting just a little bit ago when we were talking about Rocco Beck and the receivers that he has to throw to. And you said that the tight ends might be the first option. We kind of touched on the receivers that you brought in, but I really want to talk about this tight end room because you go down the list of their roster. First of all, they have 12 tight ends, which is insane. And they're all 6'7", 260 pounds. They're a giant room. Talk to me about the athleticism in this room. And is the tight ends back for Iowa State? Because it seemed like for a little bit, that's what Iowa State identity was, that 3 tight end set, 2 tight end sets at all times, no matter what. Can you talk to me about these tight ends and a name that we've got to hear for in Dublin? And for them to be successful, is that what it's got to be?
Yeah, so Ben Bramer had a breakout late in 2023. He was a freshman All-American. He's essentially a receiver. He's a big wide receiver. He moves like a receiver. He's got really good hands. He hurt his leg in the UCF game last year and missed the last half of the year. And his stats probably wouldn't tell the story, but after his freshman year, he could have made a lot of money at an SEC school if he wanted to. But a lot of this comes down to Taylor Mauser. He, before becoming the offensive coordinator, was the tight ends coach, and he is pretty much the longest, I think he is the longest tenured offensive staff member. So he's really built up that tight end room when you date it all the way back to Charlie Kohler and Chase Allen. So Bramer, I expect him to maybe not lead the team in receiving yards, but I expect him to lead the team in receptions. Gabe Burkle, he is the other tight end who is more your traditional, really good blocker. Use him in the run game a lot. So when Bramer got hurt, Burkle entered November with only 2 catches. He finished the season with almost 30, which was the third most on the team. He broke out and surprised everybody. I did not think a ton of Burkle. I saw him always more as the second tight end in there for blocking purposes, and he broke out, and he's getting NFL buzz too. So you've got those 2 guys, a redshirt freshman that they love who was hurt last year, and another Tyler Moore. He's a 4-year player who's more your blocking type. It's just a loaded tight end room, and I would expect that to be the biggest strength of the offense, both in pass catching and also helping out the run game too, blocking wise.
Moving over to defense, Iowa State last year was 38th overall in defensive efficiency nationally. They were 35th in defensive drive success rate. So they were fairly good at limiting successful drives by opposing offenses, but they were 72nd in yards per play. So they were bottom half in FBS when it comes to ability to limit some of those chunk plays, chunk yardage that opposing offenses could get. And when I think about Iowa State in general, especially under Matt Campbell, it's felt like a very defensive-minded group. And it feels like when I see some of those metrics, it maybe doesn't fit with what I think of when I think of an Iowa State defense in the current era. So how do you expect Iowa State's defense to fare heading into 2025? Just knowing that things maybe weren't quite as good as they were last year. Obviously, you won the games, but some of the efficiency may have been improved in certain areas.
100%. If you run it back this year with the same analytics, the same yards per play, the same amount of sacks, the defense will fall off a cliff. I have no doubt in my mind. What they did last year, as I look back, it's a miracle that they won 11 games, when what you consider that they lost pretty much every single one of their top 10 linebackers at one point, except for one guy. They were down at one point at West Virginia. They started a true freshman that was playing 8-man football the year before. The linebacker room was decimated, and that really hurt the defense that I already think was probably a little limited because of a not great defensive line. So when I look at it this year, they have to get to the quarterback. Last season, they were dead last in the conference in sacks. They were the second worst rush defense in the Big 12 in rushing defense. If you go back and look at the Big 12 year by year by year, Iowa State is almost top 3 in those categories every single year. Is there a bit of a return to the mean? I think so, but I don't know if they have what it takes to be elite in that level, like I know we'll see from K-State in their front 7. So to answer your question, I think they will be better. I'm still not sold on them getting to the quarterback until I see it, until I see one of the 5 edge guys that are vying for 2 spots, until I see them able to take advantage of what Dominique Orange can do in the middle.
Yeah, I just want to talk about him really quickly. Kansas City kid, senior this year. A lot of people really thinking of him as one of the top defensive tackles, defensive linemen in the Big 12 that are returning this year. Had a good season last year. Thinking about how historically the defense has been for Iowa State, that middle guy is such an important cog in that line. But talk to us specifically about him and what he brings to the team from a leadership perspective on the defensive side. Are there any maybe linemen you are circling to hopefully have a big game in Ireland?
Yeah, so Dom Orange, what has always struck me about him is his humility and honesty. He pretty much talks about it, or he's talked about it a ton this offseason, that, when I was an underclassman, I was not in shape. Last year, I wasn't as in shape as I needed to be, and he said it. The staff has said that he's in the best shape of his life, to the point where they're hoping to get 40, 45 good to great snaps out of him, where in the past, it's been only 20 or 25 because he'd get a quarterback pressure, need to go sit on the bench for 3 snaps. So if that's fixed, I think the sky's the limit for him to potentially be a first-team All-Big 12 player, a day 2 draft pick in the NFL. He is not my concern at all when it comes to the D-line. It's more guys around that, because Iowa State hasn't gotten elite pressure on the quarterback since Will McDonald. And I do think there's a chance when I look at, they were first in the Big 12 in sacks in 2022, and second in 21, and third in 2020. Was that just a historically dominant guy at your program in Will McDonald, or was it something else? And that's where that they're just going to need 1 or 2 guys. Maybe it's a by committee thing to rack up not the top level of sacks in the conference, but got to be middle of the pack to make things a lot easier on your defensive backs.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about linebackers, and I kind of want to get to some schematics of where you're at defensively, because you talk about the D line and getting to the quarterback. The linebackers, are you still running that 3-3-5? I mean, that's kind of Iowa State identity. Is that still cemented at the program?
Yeah, so the 3-3-5, it is confusing to people who have never studied it or had it instilled at your program. So the 3-3-5 isn't exactly meaning to get pressure with 3. Right. It's more so disguising where the pressure of 4 is coming from. Which linebacker is it coming from? Is it coming from your nickel safety? And it struggled last year, I think, because you had a bunch of linebackers who didn't know what they were doing, and that's not their fault. It was more of an ignorance thing, because they were playing high school football a year before that. So this year you bring back Caleb Bacon, who broke his leg in the first game of last season, who I think is Iowa State's best defensive player, and you've got a guy in Zach Lovett who is used primarily as a spy. I think you've got a couple more guys that are pseudo defensive ends disguised as linebackers that are primarily in there to rush the quarterback. And that's how the 3-3-5 works. But it all starts with being able to stop the run, because you are only rushing 3 guys up front. It's can the linebackers fill those gaps? Can they stop those holes before they start? And that's what made the 3-3-5 so successful for so long, because you had linebackers like Mike Rose and Willie Harvey and Marcel Spears, and they took a step back last year. A lot of that definitely because of injury. Can they get back to near that level? And that will be a massive key for the defense as a whole.
And so you said Bacon is back. What's his name? He was the leading tackler. Ebel, is it?
Yep,
Eibel?
Cooper Ebel.
Ebel, he's back. So you're running those 2 for sure. Do you kind of got a sense for that other linebacker spot? Who is it going to be? And what's the depth behind them? Is it? I mean, you said the freshmen got some run last year, so they've been thrown into the fire.
I don't even know if Ebel is a guaranteed. That's how deep the room. When we talked to Colby Cratch, the linebackers coach last week, we asked him who he thinks is going to play, and he gave the generic, everybody's challenging, or we got to be super critical of these guys to separate themselves. And then when he was walking out, he said, any of you guys want to pick? Because he truly has no idea. I think Bacon would be the only for sure because he was the Mike last year. He was wearing the green dot, and he is, I think, the best player on the defense, if not the best. He's up there for the best. But outside of that, I would probably lean Cooper Ebel to be on the edge. He was the one who did stay relatively healthy last year, even though he separated his shoulder in October and played through it, as we just found out. But outside of that, it's Cale Brazina is a freshman who looked really good. He filled in actually for Bacon in the Iowa game, and he led the team in tackles in Kinnick Stadium in his first ever start as a college football player. And then he got hurt. So there's just so many guys. Will McLaughlin was a really good player in 23. He came back after a back injury last year. I didn't expect him to be able to play at all. He gave the team some good snaps late in the season. So I would probably lean those three as your starters, but I think they can easily go 8 deep because they had 9 guys that either started or played significant snaps last year that are still on the team.
That's a crazy amount of depth and scares me a little bit. I know you kind of poo-pooed the linebacker room from last year, but that scares me when you get some of those guys that maybe weren't as experienced last year. They get a few games under their belt and the game slows down for them the following year. Definitely scares me a little bit.
Yeah, it's crazy because so many of them just had to learn on the fly. And Bo Goodwin is a name that I'd watch. He was a redshirt freshman. He also came from 8-man football, and you could tell pretty quickly that he was a guy that transitioned from he's just a young guy. He has to play. We have no other options to, he's a player. And he's someone that I would not be shocked at all if he emerges as a player. Carson Willich started every game in 2023, tore his ACL in spring ball last year, didn't play a snap. So that I forget about names where I almost have to look up the roster to be like, oh yeah, I forgot about that linebacker. You just have to look. You almost just have to look at the stats from last year. Remember, oh yeah, him. He's on the team still too. So that it's a good problem to have when you talk about the importance of having fresh legs, having depth when there is an injury or two inevitably. If there was any existence of karma, the Iowa State linebacker room would not be touched this year because it was completely decimated last year. And it sucked for the 2024 team. They probably could have given Arizona State a better run for their money with a healthy linebacker room, but they're now better for it because they have so many guys who have that valuable experience.
Yeah, it's almost reminiscent for me of a guy like Austin Romaine for K-State and Desmond Purnell. Those guys come in when Daniel Green gets hurt in their freshman season, and they have to come in and be the guy. And so you see Austin Romaine obviously is very much talked about right now.
Yeah.
Desmond Purnell's also, had 4 sacks last year. So a couple of guys that we love on our roster, but looks like Chef might have disappeared there for a second. So we'll go ahead and keep this thing moving though. On the defensive back. So that's the one unit we haven't talked about just yet. Last year, Iowa State, I was shocked at the amount of production those guys had going into the matchup last year. When, they're dudes with multiple interceptions, kind of, from top to bottom. Bo Freeler led the team in total tackles last year across the board for the defense with 84. He had 4 passes deflected, 2 interceptions. Malik Verdon at safety had 75 tackles with a sack, oddly enough, and 5 pass deflections with an interception. What does the returning production look like for the DB room? Are any of those guys returning? And if they aren't, who are some of the other guys that you've brought in to kind of, mix and match and hopefully rebuild from some of the holes that were left?
Yep. So Freeler and Verdon are both gone. Freeler, unfortunately, he tore his ACL in the bowl game, and that is a guy who probably shouldn't have even been playing football last year. His shoulder was so beyond messed up, and it sucked to see him have to go out like that. Verdon, kind of a similar story where he went on the field, was incredible, just got banged up so much. And the Iowa State run defense really would struggle when Verdon wasn't out there. He declared for the NFL, and he's on Atlanta now, I believe. The good news is Iowa State brings back Jontez Williams, who, if he's not the best corner in the Big 12, he is certainly among the top 3. There's some crazy, I'm not a massive Pro Football Focus guy, but there are some crazy PFF stats when it comes to Williams. And that there was some stat that showed that a quarterback would just be better off throwing it away than throwing towards Jontez. And I don't think he will be thrown at a lot this year. The problem comes on the other side, where you're between a transfer from Lindenwood that the staff speaks highly of, a guy that they switched from receiver, and a couple of redshirt freshmen. So the opposite cornerback, no matter who it is going to get tested a lot because they won't throw at Jontez. When it comes to the safeties, it's a group that's pretty deep, and they feel good about. Jeremiah Cooper's back. He had a massive 23. Took a bit of a step back last year, but he's an all Big 12 player. And the depth in that room, it's something that has pretty much always been good under John Haycock and Matt Campbell. And it's one of those things where you kind of blindly trust that, yeah, the young guys who saw some reps last year are going to get a little bit better, and that room will be fine. But I would definitely be a little bit concerned about that second corner spot, especially if the defensive line doesn't get pressure. And it all comes back to working as one unit.
All right. So thinking holistically, if Iowa State is going to beat our K-State Wildcats, us three's K-State Wildcats, what are some keys to victory? What do you think Iowa State's going to have to do to get the win?
I think just like any Farmageddon, it's boring, but it starts with stopping the run. When, like, I remember in 22, I believe, Deuce Vaughn came in as the nation's leading rusher, and Iowa State somehow bottled him up and held him to, it was under 30 yards or something like that. When you can do that and make the quarterback beat you through the air, in this case, it's Avery Johnson, who I think very highly of Avery. But the more that you can put the ball in his hands, the more you leave room for error. And the more you leave room for a game where he plays great for 95% of it, but the one or two decisions or the one or two throws can completely swing the game, as we saw last year with the fumble on the first play, the safety he took. So that's where I think it starts in controlling the run. And I know the K-State offensive line is maybe a bit of a question mark, more than I'm used to coming into this year. But when it comes to replacing Giddens, I remember asking, how are they going to replace Deuce Vaughn? And then Giddens comes along and he's a stud. So I just assume Dylan Edwards will be a stud, and Iowa State will definitely have their hands full with that. And on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's just hitting that 24, 27 point mark. That seems to be the magic number in this game. And it comes to establishing the run a little bit, but just capitalizing on red zone opportunities. That's who wins football games. That's who wins this type of game, when you can just punch it in the end zone and not have to rely on your kicker. And that's what I think it comes down to for both teams. If Rocco or Avery, whoever has the better red zone percentage, whoever doesn't make that crucial mistake in between the 20s, I think that's who walks away.
Yeah, maybe it snows and Abu Sama comes in and scores 5 touchdowns from 90 yards.
Well,
soon, who knows?
That's a good point, because Abu was in a massive, massive slump last year. And the Texas Tech game happens. It pours rain at halftime. And Sama has his best half of the year. So I don't know what it is about Sama in weird weather, but there is I'm sure the forecast says 95% chance of rain because it's Dublin.
Yeah, right.
So maybe there is a world where Sama just continues to prove that all he needs is a little bit of slippery grass and he's off to the races. So we'll see on that part.
All right, let's get into final score predictions. So hit us with your prediction, and we'll round those out, and then we'll exit.
So I actually just finished up our Big 12 season preview on Bigger Than 12 on Iowa Everywhere. And today we filled out our preseason polls, and I had K-State beating Utah in the Big 12 championship. And I think that starts with a win in Ireland and in the Farmageddon. I'll go 28-24 Kansas State in Dublin. That's my final prediction. I'm not going to change it before, because don't worry, on Friday night when I've had 12 Guinnesses, I'll be saying Iowa State 42, K-State 13. But my prediction right now, it's K-State 28-24. I just think part of me, it's not great analysis, just thinks K-State's due. This series has been very lopsided under Chris Kleiman, and I don't know how an Iowa State program that has struggled a little bit in the month of September, I don't know how they're going to look against a real opponent in week 0 when they have struggled with the Louisianas and UNIs and South Dakota States of the world over the past few years. That's what gives me a little bit of pause.
I also wonder how much validity there is to the Matt Campbell starting slow stuff when last year happened, because you win that game against Iowa early on, and last second field goal, if I remember correctly, too. Just a ridiculous ending, but I think that sets things on the right trajectory for Iowa State the rest of the season. But I think there's some validity to it. I worry so much about how lopsided this has been under Kleiman, and I hate it, but I'm going 34-32 Cyclones, because wow. I feel like I also mentally need to set myself up for the expectation that we may lose this game. And so if I go into it thinking we may lose, then it'll just be icing on the cake if we do pull out a victory. But it worries me if there is any kind of slickness. There's a bad history of K-State doing very bad things against teams like Houston, even in the matchup last year in the rain. The Tulane game, they certainly weren't playing at their best last year as well. So inclement weather concerns me, to your point on the precipitation. But unfortunately, I'm going to kick this off on a sour note and say 34-32 Cyclones.
Yeah. I've been strangely optimistic about this game, which it could be very bad. I think it's going to be a 28-27 game. K-State's going to win. It's going to be close throughout. The stress level in the entire stadium will be high. I think the stress level for this game is going to be much higher for each fan base, knowing the financial implications of the people having to go watch this game and pay a bunch of money for it. One of the big things, and Bob makes a great point about last year, with Iowa State started off the season strong. That was, if you think historically, and I like to think I keep up with what's going on in the Big 12 ever since I started at K-State, but Iowa State does have games where they start off a little bit, or seasons they start a little bit slow. They may win the game, but they start off slow. If I was going to play Iowa State this year, I want to play them in week 0 and not week 12. That's just my feeling on it. I'm saying 28-27. It's going to be something happens at the end and one of us is depressed. So
the way I'm handling it, I'm splitting this trip into the Tuesday through Friday portion, and then the second trip starts. So yeah. I'm not allowing what happened Saturday to impact the first 3 days of this vacation.
Yeah.
Because the last thing I want is to just go have the time of my life in Ireland.
Yep.
And then have the worst flight ever back and have the whole trip ruined by the game. So I'm mentally, I've had times where, like, I'll drive to Norman and I know if Iowa State loses this game, this entire trip was a failure. It was a waste of time. It was a waste of money. I will not do that with Ireland, because it's Ireland. And
that's good.
It's hard though because
Yeah.
it's not a bowl game, and that's what it's been hard to get my mind around.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not even playing like Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
That would be really cool. It'd be an awesome opportunity for your program. But if you lose to Notre Dame in the non-conference, all of your Big 12 aspirations are still there. This is such a high-pressure game that it is hard to wrap my mind around the stakes of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be so unwell Saturday because I'm working too. So
I
will be stone cold sober. I will just be sitting there pacing all day, waiting and waiting and waiting for the best college football game of the year in my eyes.
I'll be pacing with a beer in my hand. At least I have that.
Yeah, and I hope we can all get together while we're out there. But I do want to give Chef's prediction real quick. He's had some internet issues tonight. So his prediction is 28-23. He's taking the Cats to win it in Dublin. So not too far off from Matt's prediction, but a little bit larger score deficit there, discrepancy. But Jake, thanks again for coming on. Appreciate your insight on Iowa State, and let the Cokeheads know where they can find you. And we'll get you the final word here.
Yeah, Jake Brend TV is the easiest way to find me. And I know I talked about this last year, but the Bigger Than 12 podcast on Iowa Everywhere, we have specifically made that focused on just the Big 12. The amount of times we talk about Iowa State is pretty related to how many times we talk about Utah or Texas Tech. So that it's got Iowa on the name, but we want it to truly be a hub for Big 12 fans to come, and we'll shit on Utah. Don't get me wrong. We schools like that, but we like to make it a true Big 12 show. And I do it with Derek Duke, who works for Heartland College Sport. He doesn't have a favorite team, so it balances out pretty well. So check that out on Iowa Everywhere on YouTube. And then if you want, if Iowa State loses a game, Cyclone Fanatic is the place where you can come and hate watch and see all the instant reaction. That's what I do with Iowa fans. So there's nothing more I love than going and watching Iowa content after a loss. So if Iowa State loses a couple games this year, CycloneFanatic.com is all the K-State fans hub for that.
I just want to say one thing. I know 2027 is going to be really disappointing because this rivalry, that we've had going for, long time, generations,
110 years.
110 years. What are your kind of emotions on that? I mean, it's sad.
Yeah, it sucks. I think both fan bases, that there's some ugliness within it, and the majority of that comes on social media from faceless people. But I think most of the fan base respects the other, and they respect what the rivalry means. They respect how important the ag school in the middle of nowhere, how important that is for the country, how important it is for college football. And it's one of my favorite rivalries in the sport. I think it's grown a bit of a cult following across the country when it comes to true college football fans. And the fact that it's going to lose the title as the longest continuous played rivalry sucks. And if it can be changed, if there's any petition to sign, if there's any GoFundMe to donate to prevent it from happening, I will happily be a part of the cause to keep Farmageddon going strong, because there's no reason that we should go an entire college football year without it being played.
Does your guy Jamie Pollard have like an Ask the AD segment anywhere? Because Gene Taylor has one at K-State, and he actually went on a good friend of ours, Scott McFarland from Bosco's Boys. He went on that podcast recently and said, they are potentially open to revisiting the schedule matrix and potentially bringing that back on if there are enough loud voices. So we may be able to drum up some grassroots support for this, staying on the schedule if we can, if people are loud enough and vocal enough.
Yeah, Jamie Pollard, he's up there when it comes to prolific Iowa State figures at what the place was before he got there and what it is now. It is unrecognizable. He has made incredible hires, and And he deserves as much credit as anybody for where Iowa State is in football and men's basketball to this day. But there are some areas that he frustrates the fan base, and there are some areas where I think he can be a little bit out of touch. It's not anything against him as an athletic director as a whole, because I would still grade his tenure as an A+. But the fact that he doesn't view Iowa State, K-State as an important rivalry enough to protect it, I just think is a misstep. And I know where he's coming from. He didn't submit it as a protected rivalry because it'd probably be better for both teams to not have to play each other every year because it's 2 top 5 teams in the conference. But what are we doing? That Michigan and Ohio State aren't avoiding each other because they're both really good every year. They're playing the game because it's the rivalry, and that's how it should be. And I won't hear any other argument for it. If there's a way to revisit the schedule matrix again, I'll sign that petition. I'll donate the money. We will keep this happening because I want to come on the show next year too. That's another perk of it that nobody else talks about.
Absolutely. And I mean, the Big Ten, I think they've got 3 protective rivals each or 2 protective rivals.
Oh, it's
each.
way too much.
I think the Big 12 hasn't done enough to lean into the history and the rivalries that do exist. And if you're just going to protect 2 or 3 of those because they happen to be in state, I think you're missing the point more broadly. And that's, for Brett Yormark and the rest of the commissioner's office, the conference's offices, to hear that, because I think it is important. And you don't have to have an in-state rivalry for it to have a trophy and a title and a name like Farmageddon is proven for. Really, I would say the entirety of the history, but really hasn't become as intense as it has until the last 10 to 15 years. But couldn't agree more with you there. Jake, thanks again for coming on. Any last words before we get out of here?
I just had one question that I was curious from a K-State perspective. I know everyone's excited for this trip to Ireland, but what is the general consensus on losing a home game because of this? Does it feel like there's a little more pressure to have to play better on the road this year / neutral?
I think there's been a lot of discussion about this, as you can imagine, on message boards and things like that. I think the general consensus from folks like Matt and I, like our age group, is relatively neutral, if not excited for the game, and not taking into account, okay, yeah, you lose the home game. It's more so, yeah, we did this a couple years ago when we played Stanford and Arlington. That was an opportunity for us to get some more exposure, make some money, whatever.
Yeah.
I think the bigger picture is the university is going to be able to reap the benefits of this, whether it's a win or a loss. And that's kind of important in today's college football era, where you're having to make up some of Iowa State knows it too. And there's been a lot of that in the news lately of you have to make up some of these deficits and discrepancies in cash from the SEC and the Big Ten, because you just kind of have to scrape and claw to get as much of that as you can. But that's not to say there's a very vocal group of folks who are frustrated that the Manhattan local economy isn't able to take advantage of an extra home game and things like that. So, I see both sides of it. I really do in that regard, especially with the sponsor of ours, who is a local bar in Aggieville that does take advantage of home games and things like that during the season. But yeah, I think it's for at least everyone I've talked to, it's more so just excitement around the game and excitement about the possibility of making a once in a lifetime trip to a country that I had never thought about visiting. And I'm really excited to get over there.
Yeah. The marketing for this is going to be huge. You have a pretty significant number of eyeballs are going to be watching this game and getting an understanding if what these two teams playing each other means. There's a significant portion of college football fan base, just people that watch college football that don't understand the rivalry between the two schools and the fact that both schools are ranked. I was the biggest proponent of this game when they announced it, understanding the fact that, hey, we're giving up a home game for this, but you see what this game is for a lot of other schools. And, you are the game at 11 a.m., the first unofficial start of college football. A lot of people are going to be watching this. I'm excited. I love Manhattan. We also haven't beaten Iowa State at home in the last 2 times you've played there. So it's no guarantee that you all come to Manhattan and win that game. As much as, we pride on having a difficult place to play, it hasn't necessarily been the case for Iowa State here recently. So I'm excited to see, what this looks like from the outsider's perspective. And yeah.
I like that perspective. I'm glad that's what the fan base has taken, because I put myself in those shoes as like an Iowa State fan. You think, well, if they lost a home game, then it's screwing us in the Big 12 race. So I'm glad the consensus, at least among you guys, is it's a once in a lifetime experience, and that's kind of how I'm viewing it too. Would I rather the game be like Iowa State, Georgia Tech? Probably, just like I'm sure you guys would rather it be K-State, Stanford.
I don't know about that, but
well, bad example.
Yeah.
K-State, Rutgers. So, but for both programs, it is a chance to be the premier game of the week, and it's the first top 25 matchup in week 0 since 2002.
Yep.
It's a chance to showcase a great rivalry that, again, it's probably known by a lot of diehard college football fans, but maybe not to the general college football fan who's watching their team or their conference on rivalry weekend and haven't gotten the chance to check out Farmageddon. So it's a cool opportunity for both programs, and I just hope Iowa State wins it.
I already told my dad we're doing the Guinness thing. I think we're doing it on Sunday, and I got they've got the option where you can select like a custom glass engraving on a pint glass to take home with you. And it just says like, K-State, Iowa State trip, whatever. But I'm hoping that we win this game, because I don't want to have to drink out of that Guinness pint glass if it's reminding me of the game.
Yeah.
But thanks again, Jake. As always, we appreciate having you on. That's going to do it for us today. Once again, we want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Auntie Mae's Parlor. Go to antiemays.com for a full list of their upcoming events. And if you're stopping by, be sure to tell them Cocaine Willie sent you. Additionally, we have our merch store at cocainewillie.com. You can buy our Wildcat Country Let's Ride merch. I will be bringing this over across the pond to the Emerald Isle with me. So if you see me wearing this out, definitely don't hesitate to say hi. And be sure to check that out, the website at cocainewillie.com. And then finally, we are the K-State representative on the College Huddle, which is the largest community of fan-driven content in the nation. Check them out at College Huddle on social media or thecollegehuddle.com. And you can follow our show at Cocaine Willie on all social media, or individually. I'm at Bob Trollsby. Chef is at Chef Andre Napier, and Fireball Matt is at Matt Marchesini. Hold on, Chef.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug, baby.
We are all coke and no joke. Wildcat Country.
Let's ride.
Let's ride.